Good morning, Senator.
Good
I know that.
morning, Morgan.
How you been? You been well?
Yeah, I'm doing just fine. It's getting a little bit warmer now, so
Definitely.
things are looking good. I wish things were looking better on the international scene.
Same here. Same here. I know that we're going to talk about that and maybe some current events that are happening, but I know that we want to have a connection to historical events and how that plays in today's actions. So I want to go ahead and pass it to you so we can start a deep dive onto this and have a further discussion.
Yes, I fought in some of the most bitter combat of the Vietnam War with the Marine Corps. I flew as a helicopter pilot, flew 279 missions or 69 missions. Was hit by enemy ground fire 4 times. Had the flight controls knocked out by a machine gun nest that raked the belly of our helicopter once, and crash landed as a result of that, and then fought on the ground with the 1st Marine Regiment as a forward air controller, calling in airstrikes. Probably controlled the highest tonnage of bombs ever dropped by a forward air controller for the 1st Marine Division in the Vietnam War. We were defending the 2nd largest city in Vietnam, fighting against the elite 2nd North Vietnamese Division. A very, very bloody war. And there are, it's all a little risky comparing wars to wars because history changes, technology changes. But in this case, these are things that are not really subject to alteration over time. And the two things we're talking about are wartime psychology and subterranean strategy. Two completely different things, but two things that are very applicable both to the Iran War and the Vietnam War, kind of in equal measures. So I would like to start, I suppose. I wanted to quickly go through a little bit of research that I've done. I keep hearing about the Iran War, that there's this habitual claim that there's a direct and imminent threat to the lives of Americans on U.S. soil. So I did some careful research over that, and the response that I get, and I've carefully framed a number of AI inquiries on a couple of different AI sites. And the question is, are there any well-documented cases of the killing of Americans on American soil by agents of the Iranian government going back to the revolution that ousted the Shah, 1979? And the response consistently, well, there was a lot of gobbledygook thrown in, a lot of the sort of the standard propaganda. Bottom line, there is no confirmed, widely accepted case of an American being killed on U.S. soil by agents of the Iranian government since the 1979 revolution. So in 47 years, there has not been a single American killed on American soil by the Iranian government that's this big boogeyman that supposedly is an imminent threat. Then I asked another question. I said, have agents of the Iranian government ever exploded a single bomb on American soil, even if it didn't kill anybody? Did they ever, explode a single bomb? The response was, there is no confirmed case of Iranian government agents successfully detonating a bomb on U.S. soil since the 1979 revolution. And at the same time, I wanted to compare, okay, the bombings on U.S. soil versus the bombings on Iranian soil. And while this got into a huge discussion, the bottom line is that the U.S. Central Command says that there have been more than 10,000 targets struck and bombed by the U.S.-Israeli bombing campaign. So 0 attacks on U.S. soil, and one of 10,000 attacks on Iranian soil.
Yeah.
Who's
I wanted
the
to add, I collected some videos of some of those. I think it's just important for people to see the reality on the ground. You have some of the Red Crescent images that we had seen coming out of Gaza, where you have children being pulled from the rubble. So just wanted to play this quick. And there's many more, but I just wanted to interject and add that. So
Yes. Well, and anyway, I want to move on. I would like to say, I began asking. It's commonly said, well, Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon, and immediately they're going to attack us or Israel or something like that. Now, it's not out of the question that after all that we've done, they may just forge on and say, you know what, maybe we better do a nuclear weapon. Let's say that they somehow developed 10 nuclear weapons. By what logic does it automatically say that, okay, we've got 10 nuclear weapons, we are now going to attack Israel, which has 600 well-developed advanced nuclear weapons, including second strike capability, where they have Israeli submarines offshore loaded with nuclear weapons. They're obviously not going to do that. How about the United States? Let's say that somehow they were able to smuggle a nuclear bomb into the United States. Would Iran say, okay, we're going to show those Americans, we're going to light off our nuclear bomb, and yeah, they've got 5,000 nuclear weapons that are ready to turn Iran into a sheet of glass, but we're going to just have fun and we'll blow them up anyway. This is bizarre logic. Now, it is interesting that the first Ayatollah of Iran was the Ayatollah Khomeini with an O. He was a brutal, really monstrous man, very bloodthirsty guy, in my opinion. But then he passed away, and in 1989, he was replaced by the Ayatollah Khamenei with an A, not with an O. So you had two similar names, and it was so easy to conflate the two. And within a few years after he took office, once he got himself solidified as the supreme leader, then he issued a fatwa, which is a religious command. And the fatwa said that it was immoral, it was against against the Shia Muslim faith to use nuclear weapons, and they must never have nuclear weapons. That remained the official government policy of Iran throughout the life of Supreme Leader Khamenei, until he was assassinated and murdered by the Israelis during an Israeli-led operation this year. So the things we're being told are so misleading, and they're so designed to just hype people up that I just thought I'm not advocating or supporting some particular form of government in Iran. My position has always been, I've got my druthers, but I'm not an Iranian. It's not my business. It's up to them to choose their form of government, and we have enough trouble maintaining our own form of government in this country, and we probably should mind our business more. But okay, so I want to shift over, and I want to start by touching on wartime psychology. I think that one of our greatest blunders throughout our foreign policy is this notion that the ancient art of warfare that has been recorded really since there was recorded history, that somehow we've become more modern and more smart, and all of that ancient stuff is rubbish. And now we'll run wars like business enterprises. We'll use business principles, and smart, modern people can brush aside these old notions of war. Now, this has been done before. The Trump administration is not the first to talk in terms of, well, we're going to do these business deals and this kind of thing. Perhaps the worst Secretary of Defense ever in the United States was a fellow named Robert McNamara. He oversaw the Vietnam War from its very inception. He was the Secretary of Defense under President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and he served from 61 to 68. And so he was there at the time that Kennedy was assassinated, and then he led on throughout the Johnson administration. He really was the prime architect of the Vietnam War. Now, he was an interesting guy. He had run Ford Motor Company, which at the time was a huge industrial enterprise. It's not American. The automobile industry of the United States was an enormous thing. It was not like it is today, where there are multiple companies. And so if you were the head of Ford Motor Company, that was a huge deal. And that was like running Tesla or something is today. So he was a very cerebral guy, and he had a lot of business experience with Ford Motor Company. And he sought to revise the ancient art of war by applying modern business principles. And he actually discussed from time to time, it's almost like a business chart where you have one line sloping upward, and this represents the ever escalating pressure on North Vietnam. And at a certain point, it intersects with a line that is sort of a point of diminishing returns, where at this point the pain becomes so great that North Vietnam just quits, says, okay, this is economically unsustainable, and we're losing more than we're gaining, and so we're just going to quit. And that thought process ran through the Pentagon, and of course it had very disastrous results. Now, under Robert McNamara, he was in place when the decision was made to send the CIA to carry out their catastrophic assassination of our allied president, President Ngo Diem. He was the South Vietnam president. He was a staunch anti-communist, and he was a revered leader in South Vietnam. He was a very smart man, very shrewd, and he had his brother. He had his wife. They were powerful people in their own right, and he understood all of the variations and complexities of South Vietnam, and he knew how to checkmate the communists wherever they were going. And when the CIA is very well documented that the CIA helped with the assassination by a group of South Vietnamese generals, and they took President Diem, and they took him in an American vehicle, and they just murdered him right there, him and his brother. And when Ho Chi Minh was the communist leader of North Vietnam, a very, very brutal guy himself, he despised Ngo Diem. And when the news hit, he said, "I can scarcely believe the Americans would be so stupid. The enemy has been beheaded. Who now is left to lead them?" And he recognized that Diem was he was just a singularly powerful figure, and that we had destabilized the country by doing what we did. And South Vietnam saw 10 different governments within a period of just 20 months. And the problem is, when we took him out, it made all of the other leaders just look like puppets, and it gave a tremendous propaganda boost to the North Vietnamese. Now, McNamara helped to enact the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution that turned the bitter Civil War into an American war, and he followed a truly bizarre military strategy where he spared the enemy's capital city of Hanoi in North Vietnam, and more importantly, the port city of Haiphong. Now, they had a critical choke point, just like we have in the Iran war now, and in the Vietnam War, the choke point was the port of Haiphong, because about 85 or 90% of all imported things that came into the country came through that one port. 100% of their fuel. There is no source of fossil energy in Vietnam, and 100% of their fuel had to be imported, and almost the entire substance of their war material came through that port. The decision was made, we're not going to blockade the port. It might offend the Soviet Union or something like that. So we'll just fight it under this crazy business of escalating and causing too much cost for the North. Well, the problem that McNamara, I guess he learned it over time, is that wars are not like business competitions that are played out with fear and greed and high stakes, hardball negotiations. War is about blood and vengeance. And if someone kills your father, kills your brother, destroys everything you've built up for a lifetime, and then says, well, we'll stop fighting you if you'll just give up everything else that you have and then follow us. That just doesn't fly. And what has happened is, even though there were some real genuine political fissures within the Iranian government before we started bombing. Those are gone, and the Iranian people are absolutely united. There's a hatred towards Israel, which has, just endlessly caused slaughter in the Mideast almost since its inception. And now the U.S. is so closely blended. We're like agents of the Israeli government. So it is a huge mistake to think in business terms. And the idea that somehow the Iranians are going to quit just because the cost is a little bit too great, and maybe they'd rather turn off the heat for a while. I'm afraid, I would love to see it work and end the war, but I don't think it's going to.
Yeah, no, I think Iran sees this as an existential threat to their nation. I think if we were to have direct attacks on our soil, you would have this consensus from the public where they would both come together, regardless of who was in office, and they would kind of rally behind the flag. I think that's kind of what you were witnessing in Iran. And, another thing is that you kind of even said it, for the past 47 years, this has been this fear-mongering about this imminent threat, primarily from the Israeli government of, they're going to have nuclear weapons, and now it was ballistic missiles that will reach the shores of America. These threats have been going on for decades now. And so you have a government in Iran that I think we kind of, not we as in like you and me, but the leadership have really not gauged how their preparations have been. I think that they have been preparing for an engagement like this. I think we spoke about this in the last show, where we had, a top Iranian official being questioned. Okay, what do you want to do when Americans step foot on Iran soil? He says, we've been waiting for them. We're waiting for them. I think that is something that our leaders are not calculating appropriately, is this methodology by the Iranians, that they've been preparing for an attack like we were doing now for a very long time. I think what we're witnessing with this Karag Island, I think I had just seen where you had CENTCOM, other intelligence agencies that are coming out, and they're doing their war predictions on if there was a ground invasion and trying to take Karag, and none of it comes out in a pretty manner. It doesn't come out where we're on top. It's more of this best case scenario. It's another forever war. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I'm very concerned because of the next topic we want to touch on, which is the subterranean strategy. I can very much recall one of the patrols. We held a stronghold on a ridge line at a place called Nui Laksan. And I recall one skirmish we had where we had a platoon that was out. We had fought with the enemy, and now we were withdrawing. This is typically what we do. We'd go out, we'd ambush the enemy, and then we'd withdraw to the ridge line. And as we were running back, there were several of us in the group, and there was a Viet Cong soldier in what was called a spider hole, and the spider hole linked together these underground networks, and he opened up the lid on the spider hole, and he tossed out a grenade into our midst, and it exploded, but no one was hurt. But one of the Marines had spotted him, and he ran over, and he flipped the lid open. He reached down, he grabbed the Viet Cong soldier, pulled him up, and began stabbing him with a bayonet. And And you know, so and I'm moving by and keeping an eye on everybody, and hearing this poor fellow just screaming and screaming, and I yelled over and I said, shoot him. I said, for God's sake, just shoot him. And another Marine did. He shot him, and we ran on. Well, this was just one instance of the underground operations by the Viet Cong, and there were others that were very, very damaging to us later on. But so you had this mentality within the North Vietnamese, and it's identical with the Iranians, that we're fighting against an enemy who owns the skies. There was no Viet Cong Air Force, and the North Vietnamese had very little Air Force, and so we owned the skies. We could bomb, and we had enormous bombing capability. So what do you do? Well, what you do when you're fighting that kind of unbalanced war, you go underground. And the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong built an enormous network. Now, not all of it was underground. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was quite famous. It supplied all of South Vietnam from the north, and while the road was partially concealed by jungle overgrowth, I was actually able to see the Ho Chi Minh Trail from an aircraft flying at high altitude. But what they did do is they had underground military barracks, underground hospitals, underground storage depots, underground command centers, and they actually had underwater bridges that were very difficult to see from the air. And so they would build a bridge under the water, but maybe it'd be a foot deep or so, or a couple of feet deep, to where vehicles could go across it, and it didn't show from the surface. So you had all of this at Ho Chi Minh City, the capital of North Vietnam. You had the Cu Chi tunnels, which is this massive array of 3-story tunnels, and it was just an underground city designed to neutralize the firepower advantages of American forces. So that's what they had. Now, there's no evidence that the Vietnamese and the Iranians have coordinated their efforts, but Iran has an extremely sophisticated subterranean war strategy. And of course, they have modern drilling equipment that the Vietnamese did not have. So they have a vast network of reinforced facilities known as missile cities. And some of them reach depths of 500 meters. So, you're way beyond the depth where bunker buster bombs can damage them. You have missile cities, you have drone bases, you have rail mobility to move things around so that they're not always launching missiles from the same place. And I think we can be certain that if the Iranians are united, and it seems that we have managed to totally unite the Iranian people at this point, then we're going to have the most bitter encounter with them. And I just a couple of weeks ago, I visited with one of my old units where I was a Marine company commander, and just relived old times with a young fellow who was the battalion commander and his sergeant major, and I just have a great affection for the Marines. We've now got 5,000 of them on station, ready to attack up the rocky bluffs. We've sent the 82nd Airborne. We've got 3,000 troops there. The Delta Force, the Army Rangers. These are the cutting edge people who lead the attacks and do the bleeding and the dying. And I just have this sick feeling that we have people thinking in terms of business deals and that kind of thing, and having no concept at all of what it means to attack a shoreline where you are climbing up rock walls 1,000 feet, and you have an enemy who's looking down on you, who's able to send missiles and drones and so forth, and they can see you every moment, and you can't see them. This is a disaster waiting to happen. It'd be one thing if our nation was at stake and we had something. This is not our war. It is totally a war about the ambitions of one man, Benjamin Netanyahu, who many people consider a war criminal, who wants to expand the boundaries of Israel by stealing land from Lebanon, stealing land from Syria, stealing land from Egypt, and we should have no part of it.
Yeah, I think another important aspect of talking about, wartime psychology is garnering the consent of the citizenry. What we see is a lot of otherism. Constantly, what I'm told when I kind of confront this whole should we be engaging in Iran is mainly men telling me about the oppression of the Iranian woman, and that I should be on board with my country bombing the country because these women have to wear hijabs, which, I think you and I both know with the passed away Ayatollah that was just murdered, there was a lot less enforcement of those rules. We see images coming out of Iran where women are not wearing the hijabs. They're out in public with their hair exposed. But
and Morgan, if that's their rationale, why aren't we attacking Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
The women don't walk around in Saudi Arabia without wearing the full cloak, and many of them just have nothing but a slit for their eyes. You don't have that in Iran.
But my other rebuttal to that is the gauge of oppression. We see coming out of Iran, the women are predominantly more educated than the men in Iran. I think the statistic is over 70% of women or people who earn STEM degrees are women. You have primarily all the colleges and universities in Iran the women outnumber the men. So what is the true freedom that we're trying to bring to these women? Is it the American kind of the hypersexualization that America's culture kind of has? Is that what we're trying to interject on them, which I don't really perceive that to be freedom? Another thing that we hear that we kind of went into is this is the state sponsor of terrorism, where we should be engaging in these conflicts because Iran, it will interject money into different terror groups that the United States deems terror groups, such as Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen. But we little go into the airstrikes that we conduct in those countries. Like you said, we should be calling out Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's attack on Yemen for years was deemed, credible war crimes. They would attack funerals, weddings, and a lot of them were supplied with American weapons. And what we witnessed with Israel, Israel has completely flattened an area in Gaza. They're doing land consolidation in the West Bank, and they're doing egregious war crimes in Lebanon right now. I think over 100 medical facilities have been attacked. And they're conducting the same way in Iran. I think I just read today you had over 60 schools in Iran have been bombed, not just the Manab school. You have over 60 schools. The Manab one sticks out because it was right when it started. I think a lot of the children in that school were children of top officials in the Iranian government, and it was away from the capital, and it was deemed to be kind of a safe area. I think that's what, and it was 160 little girls that were murdered that day.
Yeah.
In my account, under Americans, the government's definition of terrorism, that is how we're conducting ourselves. How the president is speaking right now, how if Iran doesn't open up the Strait of Hormuz, we're going to take out their energy infrastructure. That is a direct act of terrorism if we were to act upon that. I think the direct definition is if you commit an attack on civilian infrastructure or just infrastructure for the aim of capitulating or coercing the said government into your political aims, that is an act of terrorism. And so sometimes I just like to dispel some of those misconceptions, because a lot of those are used to garner consent from our populace without it. Kind of exploits our citizenry's want to get knowledge from the public or from our leaders, and it being a sound reasoning, and so they don't do the research on their own. When if you just peeked a little bit under the rug, the argument kind of falls apart on itself.
Yeah, wartime propaganda is very successful in countries because the population is uninformed about foreign affairs. And so they have very little, there are not many dots to connect in the minds of most people. So what they tend to hear is they hear a story framed by their government, and the story typically will try to focus on one thing. And so you can say, well, look, we should attack Iran because the women have to wear coverings and they can't go outside with their hair showing, and people say, yeah, I don't agree with women having to dress a certain way, and they never say, well, of course, we're going to put together a big alliance of countries that also don't let their women wear this particular, wear their hair the way they want. And somehow that will be just. So people don't put those things together. Most, people who are involved in long-time study of foreign relations immediately sort of checkmate those things. Say, well, that's ridiculous. Who cares? Or why do you fight a war over that? Why don't why don't people just simply resolve that over time? A very interesting thing. It's probably been 6 years back. There was a flurry of media stories about a very real cultural phenomenon in Iran. The Christian faith was growing faster within Iran than in any other country in the world. Now, you probably haven't heard that. Most people haven't, but it was very well documented, well reported by major outlets. And what was happening is that there was a cultural change taking place, and Christianity was very appealing to the Iranian people, and the clerics actually were petitioning the Ayatollah, you got to do something about this. This is really a threat to the Shia Muslim faith. I can only imagine how enormously the advance of Christianity is going to be set back, because now, it used to be there was this distinction between the way that Jewish Israel and Christian America acted. And when I say Christian America, I'm just saying this is sort of the predominant faith. And you know, under Christianity, the focus is on Jesus Christ, who never once uttered a word of encouragement for war, not once. But probably his most famous address on this point was the Sermon on the Mount, where he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." And that really is the foundation, I think, in Western civilization for the way that at least the people culturally would like to approach things, that peace is a good thing. Now, for Israel, war, an incessant war and domination and cruelty seems to be the consensus, the national consensus there. And I wish it weren't. There was a time when there was a greater division within the Israeli population, and more people were outspoken against some of the excesses, and they helped to rein in some of the things that were being done. But under Netanyahu, it seems that the opposition has dissipated, and wars of cruelty and brutality, wars of aggression, wars of extermination, wars of genocide seem to be all the thing, and there seems to be very little resistance to it.
Yeah. I think with Israel's case, you kind of alluded to that there's this blurred line that the American government is taking with the Israeli government. And I find it very scary because they just had a report come out just the other day where the Israeli government were torturing he was a little over a year old. I don't know if you had seen the report.
I don't think so.
There's video footage of the Israeli military returning the child to Red Crescent, but they were torturing him to get a confession from his father. His father is still in prison.
Torturing a 1-year-old?
They tortured a 1-year-old. They burned his legs with cigarettes, and they drove a nail through his leg, and all of that. It's all the child. There's video footage of the child with its wounds, and there's video footage of the Israeli government or military men returning the child to the Red Crescent.
Wow, that's incredible. The viciousness, the brutality just seems to have no limits for the Israeli army. And I really am offended by the notion that we're associated with them. And I have this sort of nightmarish vision that there's going to be a ribbon that the American soldiers who are veterans after this war will be required to wear, and it's going to have a Star of David on it, which is just going to be a revolting thing to be associated with the practices of a country that that is pounding nails through the feet or the leg of the child.
Yeah. I'll send you some of the reports afterwards, but yeah, they're I believe it was TRT World that they kind of broke the story, and they had the images of the child. It's just heartbreaking, that anyone could exert that kind of brutality to an infant, and at the aims of coercing the father, because that those confessions are not real when you kind of coerce father in that manner, and who's just being I'm scared to know what they're doing to the father at this point. They're willing to do that to a child.
Yes.
And so I find it very alarming of kind of who we are choosing to ally with. And does that kind of mean that we conduct ourselves in the same way, or are we proving that we should conduct ourselves in that way, our soldiers? And so I find that highly alarming. I
Yeah,
think that,
we used to, and to this day, I'm sure Marines, they sing the Marine Corps hymn, and one line is to keep our honor clean. We're proud to take the title of United States Marine. And I'm just offended by the idea that the history and the reputation and the sacrifices of the Marines over generations are now going to be smeared and tainted by the war crimes of the Israeli government and the fact that we're working in conjunction with them. And it's just I love our Marines, and I'm just sick to my stomach when I hear of the things that the Israelis are doing.
I know it's such a shame. And I know that we probably should be wrapping up near here soon, so I want to go ahead and kind of give you closing statements on what we had spoken about today, kind of the connection to the past, how we should be weary of it, and always critical of certain type of war propaganda, and what is that we fear will likely come. I think you and I both know that once you deploy the 82nd Airborne, you're moving these Marine Expeditionary Units in. You're not doing that for show. That is, they will touch ground somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think that I'll pass that to you. Have closing statements on what we're getting ready to see, and kind of recap what we had spoken about today.
Yeah, I know there's been this question. President Trump engages in very high stakes negotiations, sometimes successfully. And so there's been a tendency for people to think, well, maybe this is just a tremendous bluff. I would have to say I wish that I were wrong, but when you see such extensive efforts being made at such enormous expense to the nation, involving significant and growing loss of lives and casualties, still modest but growing. This is not a bluff, and I think that the only hope and the only prayer is that some rational people can cut through all of the voices of the pro-Israeli billionaires on the golf course, and some rational, clear-eyed people can say, don't do this. Just because you're bigger than the other guy, it doesn't always work out the way that you expect. And the geography there is so daunting. There's a reason that Iran is one of the world's ancient civilizations, and it has a lot to do with the geography of that land, that it is very difficult to subdue it. And that's why the Persian people have been there for thousands and thousands of years. And they've had great civilizations for thousands of years. We can bludgeon them, we can brutalize them, we can try to beat them into submission, but I think we've united them. And my fear is we're uniting all of the Middle East against Western civilization, and we're losing our moral high ground that we, generations and generations struggled to gain. So anyway, I would caution people not to put too much reliance on the idea that this is a bluff. I think it's going way beyond a bluff. And the only question really is, can someone pull the president back before he pulls the trigger and sends American ground troops into what could be a multi-generational war in Iran, and a war that ultimately could end the way that the Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan ended, by literally breaking the nation apart.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that, Senator. I know maybe next week we can get into further some of I know the reports that are coming out is kind of, we had spoken about this a few weeks ago, how, back 2 years ago, you had high-ranking military officials sounding the alarms on how we're sending all of our weapons to Ukraine. That leaves us in a compromised position. And then we're upping our weapon shipments to Israel, further leaves us in a compromised position to where we're at now. I think that there are reports that we have used during this, shorter than a month aggression in Iran, this war, we've used over 850 Tomahawk missiles. We don't know what's left in our reserve right now, but it can't be much. I think they say there's only 90 that they can make it a year. So we're leaving ourselves in a very peculiar situation if there ever were to be a ground invasion in the United States. It's kind of, if there were to ever really be that kind of assault that we have, we're leaving ourselves in a very vulnerable situation. So I think maybe that'd be interesting to talk about next week. But of course, the news changes every day. So I want to go ahead and encourage everyone to tune in next week to focus on the news. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Morgan.